Introduce Cassie, a rebellious, aspiring musician, and her powerful mother, Victoria. Set the stage for the dramatic event at Victoria's 50th birthday gala, where she plans to announce a new husband and guardian for Cassie. Have you ever felt like you were drowning in gold? Like everything you touched was brilliant and shiny and expensive, but the second you got close, it just felt cold? That was Cassie's life. At 19, she was the daughter of Victoria Sterling, a name whispered in the hallowed halls of New York City real estate. Not a CEO of some fashion empire. No, that's too simple. Victoria was a queen of concrete and glass. She didn't just sell mansions, she built them from the ground up, brick by painful brick. She turned forgotten brownstones into seven-figure masterpieces, and she wore her success like a suit of armor. She was impenetrable, and Cassie, she was the one living inside that suit of armor, suffocating. It's funny, the things we remember. It wasn't the smell of fresh cut flowers flown in from Holland or the scent of Victoria's expensive perfume that Cassie remembered most. It was the faint, lingering smell of sawdust and varnish, the smell of the grand old Victorian home that Victoria had spent 3 years flipping, a place Cassie had loved to sit in the quiet, dusty corners. But as soon as the last piece of furniture was restored and the final wall was painted, it was gone, sold. Just another transaction, just another thing to be traded for money. Tonight was Victoria's 50th birthday. The air in the penthouse was thick with the scent of lilies and the quiet hum of a string quartet. But under the music, Cassie could hear something else, the high-pitched, almost panicked whispers of the socialites, a nervous energy that thrummed through the room. Victoria had invited the city's most powerful men, not just for a party, but for a public spectacle. Cassie, a word. Victoria's voice cut through the air, sharp and precise. She wasn't standing, she was commanding. She wore a deep emerald green gown that looked like it was spun from money itself. She held a glass of champagne, but she didn't drink. She only stared, her eyes scanning the room, assessing, calculating. I trust you've made your decision, Victoria said, not looking at Cassie, but at the four men standing nearby, their smiles as bright and fake as the chandeliers above them. Cassie's heart felt like it was doing a slow, heavy drumbeat in her chest. She hadn't made a decision. She had known about this night for months, the grand plan to merge their empires, but she had been so focused on her own escape, on the old, broken piano she was secretly trying to buy, and the open mic nights she played at in a hidden club downtown. She had hoped this night would never come. The men's smiles widened, their gazes fixed on Cassie like she was a prize. There was the hedge fund manager, with a laugh that boomed but never reached his eyes. The famous lawyer, whose handshake felt more like a contract than a greeting. The tech entrepreneur who never put his phone down. And the sports agent, who was too busy sizing up the room to even glance at Cassie. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted an asset. Mother, this isn't a game, Cassie whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. Victoria finally looked at her, and the look was cold. No, my dear, this is life. And for the first time, Cassie realized her mother wasn't just doing this for her. She was doing it to prove something to herself, to prove that she could control everything and everyone around her, even her own daughter's heart. She was terrified of being alone, of being without a strong figure to build a family with. But she was trying to force a family, not find one. The moment had come. Victoria took a microphone, the sudden silence deafening as the quartet stopped playing. Friends, colleagues, and family, she announced, I am not only celebrating a milestone birthday, I am announcing my retirement and a new beginning for my daughter. Cassie's stomach twisted. The air felt thin. She closed her eyes, trying to find a solid piece of ground, but there was none. She was standing on a precipice, and her mother was about to push her off. But as she opened her eyes, a reflection caught her attention. A window on the other side of the room, and through it, she saw him. The music begins to swell again, a tense, dramatic melody. The camera focuses on the faces in the crowd, a mix of curiosity and anticipation. The air was so thick with tension, you could almost taste it, like old money and ambition mixed with the faint scent of lilies. But through the blur of polished suits and designer dresses, Cassie saw him. He wasn't on the stage, or even in the ballroom. He was outside, through the massive, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto the city. A man in a simple t-shirt and work pants was carefully examining a large, weathered, wooden chair. He wasn't a guest. He was one of the event staff. A carpenter or furniture restorer, maybe. His hands were dusted with what looked like sawdust, and they moved with a careful, almost loving precision over the wood. And next to him, sitting on the cold marble floor, was a little girl with pigtails, her knees pulled up to her chest. She wasn't playing with a tablet or a fancy toy. She was meticulously drawing with crayons on a piece of paper, her small tongue sticking out in concentration. Cassie watched as the man, Marcus, paused his work. He didn't look at his phone or check the time. He simply knelt down, running a rough, calloused hand over the little girl's hair. He said something, and she giggled, a sound that cut through the polished silence of the room like a bell. She held up her drawing, and his face broke into the most genuine, open smile Cassie had ever seen. He put his arm around her and whispered something, and the two of them just sat there for a moment, in their own little world. The contrast was staggering. Inside, men with heavy watches and even heavier egos were waiting to be chosen, their eyes gleaming with greed, their smiles like masks. Outside, a man with dirt on his hands and a hole in his shoe was sharing a moment of pure, unscripted joy with his daughter. He wasn't performing, he was just living. And for the first time that night, Cassie felt a pull, a real connection. Victoria's voice, amplified by the microphone, brought Cassie crashing back to the present. Cassie, darling, please approach the podium. The crowd turned as one, their gazes like spotlights, all on her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She was supposed to do what her mother had rehearsed with her 100 times: smile, thank them, and choose one of the men. A handshake, a flash of cameras, a new contract signed. But that felt like a betrayal of everything she wanted to be. She looked at her mother. Victoria, a warrior of commerce, stared back, her expression an unblinking command. Choose, Cassie. Any of these men could secure your future. Any of them could protect our legacy. Cassie's eyes scanned the four men once more. The lawyer, the hedge fund manager, the tech guy, the sports agent, they were all just walls. Four perfectly constructed, perfectly polished walls designed to keep people out. And then she saw the carpenter and his daughter again, just for a fleeting moment before they disappeared from view. He wasn't a wall. He was a door, a way out. Mother, Cassie said, her voice trembling but steady. I don't want any of these men. The room froze. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, like a wave hitting a quiet shore. Victoria's smile, which she had been holding so carefully, twitched. Cassie, don't embarrass me, she hissed, the subtext clear. Don't you dare ruin everything I've built for you. But it was too late. Cassie had already made her choice. The music swells dramatically as the camera focuses on Victoria's face, her expression shifting from command to fury. Mother, Cassie repeated, her voice louder now, echoing through the stunned silence. She pointed a shaking finger toward the window where Marcus had just been. If I have to choose, I choose him. Silence. Then, a ripple of nervous laughter from the back of the room. It quickly escalated into a chorus of condescending snickers. A carpenter, someone whispered. Is this a joke? Victoria's face went pale, then crimson, with a rage Cassie had never seen. The veneer of a perfect, poised hostess shattered. Cassie! Do you have any idea what you're saying? He's a manual laborer. He has nothing. But Cassie stood her ground. He has something they don't, Mother. He has integrity and love. She looked at her mother, her eyes pleading. I saw how he looked at his daughter. That's the kind of man I want in my life. Not a transaction, not a contract, but a promise. The room was a hurricane of whispers and camera flashes. The four men stood there, stunned, their carefully practiced smiles gone. They were no longer powerful moguls. They were just five men who had been publicly, utterly rejected by a teenager for a ghost. And then the ghost walked in, a tall, handsome man with a dusty t-shirt and a bewildered expression pushed through the crowd. It was Marcus. He had been sent inside to get something for his daughter and had heard the commotion. He looked around the extravagant room, then at Victoria's furious face, then at Cassie, who was now a beacon of defiant bravery in the center of the room. He had no idea what was happening. Victoria stepped forward, her voice a low, furious hiss. You? Who are you? Marcus blinked, confused. I'm Marcus. I was just working. I don't. Get out! Victoria screamed. Get out of my party! Get out of my building! Get out of my life! Cassie stepped in front of him, her body a shield. No, he's not going anywhere. If you force me to choose between your world and his, I'm choosing his. And with that, she grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him through the crowd and out of the room, leaving her mother and her perfect world behind in a storm of shattered glass and broken promises. The music becomes sparse and melancholy, reflecting the isolation and heartbreak. The camera follows Cassie as she walks through the city with Marcus, their faces a mix of confusion and determination. The cold New York night air felt like a shock to Cassie's system. She had never been without a coat in the winter. She had never just walked. She had a driver for that. But here she was, her flimsy dress feeling thin against the chill, her heels clicking on the pavement. She was walking with a stranger, a carpenter, her mother's screaming still ringing in her ears. Cassie didn't have her wallet, her phone, her purse. All of it was still in the penthouse. All of it was now gone. Marcus, still dazed, tried to process what had just happened. "What did you mean back there?" he asked gently. Cassie stopped, her breath misting in the air. "I meant everything. She thinks love is something you buy, something you hire. But I saw you and your daughter. That's what I want. That's what I miss." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then a small, sad smile touched his lips. "I don't have a mansion, you know. I have a tiny apartment with a leaky pipe and a daughter who thinks that macaroni and cheese is its own food group." Cassie's face broke into a real, genuine smile. "I have never had macaroni and cheese," she said. The next few days were a blur. The media went into a frenzy. Headlines screamed about the heiress's scandalous choice and the Sterling family betrayal. Social media lit up, with some mocking Cassie and many others cheering her on. The public loved a fairy tale where the underdog won, even if the underdog was a gilded cage heiress. But the reality was far from a fairy tale. The next morning, Cassie's cards were declined. Her car was gone. Her mother's lawyer called and coldly informed her she was officially cut off. She was an outcast. She had chosen a new life, but she had no idea how to live it. She ended up at Marcus's apartment, a small two-bedroom walk-up. The peeling wallpaper was a stark contrast to the perfectly curated art on her mother's walls. The pipes gurgled and groaned, and the couch she was given to sleep on was lumpy and old. She felt lost. She felt like a fraud. That first night, she lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the city and the gentle snores of Marcus and Maya in the other room. She was so used to silence in her mother's sterile mansion. But this was a different kind of quiet. It was the quiet of a life being lived, of people breathing and existing. She had chosen love, but she had no idea if she was strong enough to handle the price. The mood shifts to one of warmth and discovery. The lighting becomes softer, brighter. The music is now a gentle acoustic melody. Cassie had never done her own laundry. The first time she tried, she put the detergent pod directly into the drum without a single garment, and Marcus just laughed. A deep, easy sound that filled the small space. He didn't mock her. He simply showed her how. It was in these small, everyday moments that Cassie started to see a different kind of life. The apartment was small, but it was alive. Maya's colorful drawings were taped to the refrigerator. A half-finished board game sat on the coffee table. The air smelled like burnt toast and laughter. Cassie had always felt like a guest in her own home, but here, she was a participant. She learned how to make macaroni and cheese from a box. She helped Maya with her homework, discovering a patience she never knew she had. And in the evenings, she would sit by the window and quietly play her guitar, the instrument she had always been told was just a hobby. One afternoon, she found Maya trying to draw a picture of a little girl and a boy. Maya kept erasing the boy, her forehead furrowed. Cassie sat with her. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I can't draw a dad who is happy," Maya said. Cassie looked at the picture and then at a photograph on the nightstand. A beautiful woman with a bright smile. "That was my mom," Marcus said softly from the doorway. He went and sat with Maya. "She was the kindest person I ever knew. My dad. He was so sad after she left. He just stopped smiling." Cassie's heart ached. She realized Marcus wasn't just a simple carpenter. He was a widower who had carried a great weight of grief. This was a man who understood loss in a way her mother never would. Flashback. Scene. The camera shows a much younger Victoria, no older than Cassie is now, being dropped off at a boarding school. Her father, a stern-faced man, hands her a wad of cash. "Your mother is an embarrassment," he says, "but you have a future. Don't disappoint me." As he drives away, a much younger woman with blonde hair and a carefree smile gets into the passenger seat. The words came back to her. "Don't disappoint me." The fear of being a disappointment had driven Victoria her entire life, ever since her father had abandoned her and her mother for a younger woman, seeing them as failures, as dead weight. She wasn't trying to protect Cassie's future. She was trying to protect herself from being abandoned again. Cassie understood now. It wasn't about the money, it was about her mother's fear. That night, Cassie told Marcus she wanted to start playing at an open mic again, but this time, for money. Marcus looked at her with a gentle, proud smile. "You don't need to do that for me," he said. "I know," Cassie replied. "I want to. I'm not a Sterling anymore. I'm just Cassie." And in that moment, she realized she had found a wealth far greater than anything her mother's mansion could offer. She had found herself. The music becomes tense and foreboding. The shots are quick, showing Victoria alone in her massive home, looking tired and frail. Life went on. For Cassie, it was a new kind of busy, not the busy of endless galas and charity events, but the real kind, working part-time at a local music store, teaching Maya her first guitar chords, and trying to cook something that didn't come from a box. She was making friends, real friends, people who didn't care about her last name. But in her old world, a different storm was brewing. The stress of the last few months had finally caught up with Victoria. She had always been unstoppable, a force of nature, but forces of nature can also break. She collapsed during a high-stakes board meeting. The diagnosis was simple, yet terrifying. A serious stress-induced heart condition. The doctors told her she needed to slow down, to rest, to let others take care of her. And that's when the true price of her life became clear. The four men who had been so eager to become her family were nowhere to be found. They called, of course, but not to ask about her health. They wanted to know if she was still in control of her assets, if her legal affairs were in order. The famous lawyer offered legal advice, not comfort. The hedge fund manager sent a generic flower arrangement, a transaction disguised as sympathy. Victoria found herself alone in her giant, empty mansion. The silence was deafening. No staff to fuss over her, no clients to impress, just the echo of her own heartbeat. She had spent a lifetime building walls to protect herself, only to find that she had built a prison. She had traded love for leverage, and now she had nothing to lean on. The news reached Cassie through a mutual friend. She showed the article to Marcus, a grim photo of her mother on the front page. Cassie's heart ached, but the anger was still there, a hot coal in her chest. "She chose this," Cassie said, her voice tight. "She chose her world over me." Marcus just looked at her, his eyes full of compassion. Sometimes people make choices not because they are evil, but because they're afraid. Maybe she's just as much of a victim as you are. Cassie didn't respond, but she couldn't get his words out of her head. Was her mother really a victim of her own success? Or was she just a tyrant who had finally gotten what she deserved? The music softens, becoming more hopeful. The camera follows a simple car driving up to the gates of the massive mansion. A contrast is clearly visible between the two worlds. A week passed. A week of Cassie fighting with herself. One part of her wanted to stay away, to let her mother feel the loneliness she had so eagerly inflicted. The other part of her, the part she had learned from Marcus, couldn't bear the thought of her mother being sick and alone. She finally made a decision. She didn't call or text. She just went. Cassie drove up to the wrought iron gates of the mansion, but she wasn't alone. Marcus sat beside her, a thermos of soup in his lap, and Maya was in the back seat, holding a drawing of three smiling stick figures holding hands. They were bringing the only thing that could truly heal the Sterling mansion: a family. The security guard looked shocked to see them. He let them in without a word. The house was cold and quiet, the air stale. It smelled of dust and unlived-in rooms. They found Victoria in her bedroom, a shell of the woman she had once been. She was pale, her shoulders slumped, her powerful presence gone. She looked at Cassie, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice frail. "I brought you something," Cassie said simply, holding out a bowl of the soup Marcus had made. Victoria looked at the soup, then at Marcus and Maya, who were standing quietly behind Cassie. Her eyes welled up with tears. "The others, they didn't come," she mumbled, her voice cracking. Marcus just gave her a gentle, knowing nod. "We're not the others," he said softly. "We're just neighbors helping a neighbor." Maya, sensing the tension, walked over to Victoria's bed and handed her the crayon drawing. "This is a picture of my family," she said in her sweet, clear voice. "My dad says we should always take care of the people we love." Victoria took the drawing, her hand shaking. The crude lines of the stick figures looked more beautiful to her than any masterpiece she owned. She saw herself in the third figure, her heart breaking for the little girl she had never truly been, and the mother she had failed to be. The walls around her heart, so carefully built over a lifetime, finally began to crumble. She looked at Marcus, at the kindness in his eyes, then at Cassie, who was finally looking at her with forgiveness instead of anger. "Cassie," Victoria said, her voice barely a whisper, "I was so wrong. I, I've been so scared of being alone. I thought money was the only way to be safe. But Marcus, he's more of a man than any of the others." The music swells with a sense of peace and resolution. The visuals show a montage of the future: Victoria's mansion feeling more lived in, and the construction of a new workshop. The days that followed were not a miracle. Healing a lifetime of emotional wounds takes time, but the foundation was there. Victoria, a woman who had once built empires of glass and steel, now found herself building a different kind of legacy. She spent her days with Maya, helping her with school projects. She started taking long, slow walks with Marcus, not to talk business, but just to listen. And she sat with Cassie for hours, listening to her play her music, finally hearing the song her daughter had been trying to play for years. Victoria helped Marcus expand his carpentry business, not as a client, but as a partner. She used her business savvy to help him secure a warehouse, her connections to buy him new tools. She helped him build a workshop, a place where he could continue his craft, a place where he could truly thrive. One day, Standing in the new sunlit workshop, Marcus turned to Victoria. This is a big step. Are you sure? Victoria looked at him, then at Cassie, who was sanding a piece of wood with a focused expression. I've spent my life building things that people could buy and sell, she said. This time I'm building something that can't be bought, something that will last. The final scene shows Cassie and Victoria, side by side, each with a different tool in their hands, laughing as they try to nail a piece of wood. The camera pans out, showing the workshop filled with beautiful, handcrafted furniture. On screen text appears. She chose love over luxury, and in doing so, she taught her mother how to build something real. Because sometimes, the greatest wealth you can ever have isn't found in a building, it's found in the people you build with. The screen fades to black as a final single guitar chord rings out. We've all been there, haven't we? Standing at a crossroads, tempted by what's shiny and new, what promises security and status. We're taught from a young age that wealth is measured in numbers on a screen, that success is defined by the size of your house or the car you drive. But as Cassie's story shows us, those things are just things. They're a gilded cage that can trap us just as easily as they can protect us. The real wealth isn't the number in your bank account. It's the number of people who show up for you when you're sick. It's the laughter that echoes in a small apartment. It's the hands that help you build something from scratch, not the ones that just want to sign a contract. This story isn't just about a rich girl and a humble carpenter. It's a mirror. It asks us to look at our own lives and question the foundations we've built. Have we been chasing a mansion only to find ourselves living in a prison of our own making? Have we been so focused on acquiring things that we've forgotten how to truly connect with people? The most valuable assets in life aren't found on a balance sheet. They are the people we love, the connections we nurture, and the moments of genuine, unscripted joy. So let me ask you, if you had to choose between a life of luxury and a life of authentic, heartfelt connection, which would you choose? Maybe the better question is, what would you be willing to give up to find that true wealth? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. And as you go about your day, remember this: be kind, be authentic, and build a life that is rich, not in money, but in love. Sending you all warmth and light